Picture yourself in a courtroom. The judge slams his gavels, the sound cracks like thunder, and the command follows. Prove that God exists, but do it using only reason. No scriptures, no blind faith, only the mind. The room falls silent. You can almost hear the collective heartbeat. The challenge seems impossible, blasphemous even. How could logic reach the divine? How could human thought touch what lies beyond time? Yet in the 13th century, a man named Thomas Aquinas accepted that challenge without hesitation. He didn't turn to sermons or to fear or to miracles. Instead, he turned inward, into the unshakable clarity of reason itself. From pure logic, he crafted 5 rational paths that he claimed led inevitably to the existence of God. These became known as the 5 ways. But here's the question that still echoes centuries later. Do these arguments survive in the age of science, in an era that has mapped the stars, split the atom, and questioned the very fabric of reality? What do they really prove? And what kind of God do they reveal? Tonight, we step into the mind of one of humanity's greatest thinkers, a man who believed that truth itself could be reasoned into light, a mind both humble and vast, shaped by silence forged in thought, the mind of Thomas Aquinas. In the 13th century, there lived a quiet, contemplative young man, eyes open to the world but gaze fixed on something far deeper. In crowded classrooms, while others argued loudly about faith, politics, or philosophy, he sat motionless, his thoughts moving in invisible patterns no one could see. His teachers called him the dumb ox, because he rarely spoke, and when he did, his words came slowly, like stones carefully placed to build something that would last forever. But behind that silence was an intellect of astonishing power, one that would eventually reshape theology, philosophy, and even science itself. The ox, they said, would one day roar so loudly the entire world would hear. Thomas Aquinas was born around 1225 in Roccasecca, Italy, into a family of nobility and influence. From birth, his path seemed already written, a career of prestige, wealth, and high status within the church. His parents sent him to study among the Benedictine monks, hoping he would one day wear the mantle of power. But destiny had other plans. Aquinas' mind wasn't drawn to comfort or position. It was drawn to truth. And the truth, he sensed, was something that neither politics nor privilege could contain. When he announced his decision to join the Dominican order, a life of poverty, devotion, and study, his family saw it as rebellion. They tried persuasion, then anger, and finally desperation. His own brothers kidnapped him and locked him in the family castle for nearly a year, determined to break his will. But the silence that once made him seem weak became his greatest strength. In captivity, Aquinas read, wrote, meditated, and grew more certain than ever. The walls that confined his body could not confine his thought. When he was finally released, he returned to his chosen path with a conviction that would never waver again. In Paris and Cologne, he studied under Albertus Magnus, one of the towering intellectuals of his time. It was there that Thomas began to weave something extraordinary, a bridge between Aristotle's philosophy and Christian theology, between logic and faith, between the known and the infinite. Most thinkers before him believed reason and belief were opposites, one the realm of men, the other the realm of God. But Aquinas saw no such division. To him, reason was not the enemy of faith. It was faith's greatest ally. Reason, he believed, could lead a soul toward divine understanding, step by rational step, like a ladder stretching upward into eternity. This harmony between logic and spirituality became the foundation of his life's work. And that work would become Summa Theologica, a masterpiece that has outlived empires and reshaped minds for nearly 8 centuries. In it, Aquinas didn't simply give answers. He taught humanity how to ask the right questions. Every page is a conversation between reason and mystery, between what we can know and what we can only feel. Among those questions, one stands out: does God exist? And to answer it, he didn't appeal to miracles or divine revelation. He built a case with the precision of a mathematician and the wonder of a poet. His logic was simple but profound. Everything that moves must be moved by something. Everything that exists must have a cause. Everything imperfect must point to something perfect. From these observations, he constructed his 5 ways. 5 rational proofs for the existence of God, not as an act of faith, but as an act of reason. And so his journey began. From motion to cause, from existence to necessity, from perfection to design. Each step a thread in a tapestry of logic so elegant that even today scientists, philosophers, and skeptics still wrestle with its implications. Thomas Aquinas died young, at just 49, yet his legacy became immortal. He was canonized in 1323, declared a doctor of the Church, and later recognized not just as a saint, but as one of the most luminous minds in the history of human thought. Even atheists and modern physicists still speak his name with respect because what he left behind was more than theology. It was a challenge to think, to question, to seek truth with courage and clarity. His life whispers a message across the centuries: that faith need not fear reason, that reason, when followed to its end, may just lead us back to the divine, that perhaps the greatest act of worship is understanding. And so, with the mind of Aquinas as our compass, we now turn to his first proof, the one that begins not with faith but with motion itself. A perfectly still lake, a single stone falls into it, ripples begin to spread outward. Something or someone must have thrown that stone. The question is, what moved first? A perfectly still lake, a single stone falls into it. Ripples spread soft and widening, distorting the mirrored surface of the world. But the stone did not throw itself. Something or someone caused its fall. Thomas Aquinas began his first proof with this simple observation: nothing moves without a mover. Everything in the universe, from the drifting of galaxies to the flicker of a candle flame, is in motion. Planets spin, winds flow, hearts beat, rivers run. But motion doesn't begin on its own. For anything to move, it must be moved by something else. Here lies the paradox. If everything that moves was set in motion by something else, what set the first thing into motion? Imagine a long line of dominoes stretching into infinity. Each falls because another pushed it. Yet no matter how far you trace the chain backward, at some point one domino must have been the first to fall, or none of them would have fallen at all. Without a beginning, motion itself could never begin. Aquinas called this origin the unmoved mover, the first cause of all movement, itself untouched, unchanged, unmoved by anything else. It is the spark that ignited every motion in the cosmos, the invisible hand that first stirred existence into being. Think of a train. Endless cars connected one after another, each pulled by the one before it. No matter how many cars there are, the train will never move unless something at the very front, a locomotive, generates motion. Without it, every car remains perfectly still. The unmoved mover, Aquinas said, is that locomotive, not physical, not bound by space or time, but the first source of all motion in reality. And that, he reasoned, is what we call God. Centuries later, Newton's laws would reveal that once an object is in motion, it can remain in motion unless acted upon by another force. But even Newton's universe begins with a question Aquinas had already asked: who or what moved first? If the cosmos truly began, If there was a moment when the void was suddenly alive with motion and light, then something must have initiated it. Modern science calls that event the Big Bang, but even then Aquinas' question remains: what caused the Big Bang? What ignited the first flash of energy that expanded into everything we know, every atom, every star, every heartbeat? Some physicists point to the multiverse hypothesis, suggesting that our universe might be just one among countless others, each born from the collapse or creation of another. But Aquinas would smile at that idea and ask again, what began the first one? For even if there were infinite universes, each birthing the next, the question still echoes back through eternity. What gave rise to existence itself? You can trace every flame to a spark, every spark to friction, every friction to movement, and yet, at the origin of all movement, something stands still. Something that does not depend on time, because time itself began when motion began. Something that is not made of matter, because matter cannot exist before existence itself. Something unmoved, eternal and self-sufficient, the silent root of all becoming. That is what Aquinas called the first mover. Imagine you walk into a room glowing with light. You look for the source, a lamp, a window, a bulb. You follow the wire to the wall to the power grid, the grid to a generator. Each source points to another, yet somewhere there must be the ultimate source, a station, a sun, a beginning from which all energy flows. In that same way, Aquinas reasoned, everything that exists derives its motion and its very being from an original source. Without that source, the light of reality itself would go dark. This was not blind mysticism, it was logic, built from the same rational structure that would later shape science itself. Aquinas wasn't trying to replace reason with faith. He was showing that reason, when followed without fear, leads us to something beyond the reach of equations. He believed the unmoved mover wasn't a mechanical force, but a living one, the ultimate intelligence behind all order, harmony, and change. Not just the first cause long ago, but the continuous sustainer of everything that moves now, from the orbit of planets to the breath you're taking in this moment. For Aquinas, God was not a being among beings, not a figure who interferes occasionally in the world, but the ground of being itself, the silent motion beneath all motion, the pulse within every heartbeat of creation. And so his first way, from motion to mover, was not just a proof. It was a revelation. It asked humanity to look not merely at what moves, but why it moves at all. As centuries passed, philosophers and scientists would return to this question again and again, from Aristotle to Newton, from Einstein to Hawking. Even when theories evolved, the mystery remained. How did the first movement begin? Some say the question no longer matters, that the Big Bang was random, uncaused, a fluctuation in a quantum vacuum. But even a vacuum is something. It exists. And if existence itself had to begin, then what caused that? Aquinas' answer was both simple and transcendent. Behind all motion, behind all becoming, there must be something that never began. Something eternal, changeless, and self-existent. Call it what you will. He called it God. This was his first way, the motion of reason toward the unmoved source of all things. But Aquinas didn't stop there. Motion alone was not enough. He wanted to understand the cause of existence itself, not just why things move, but why they are. And so he turned to his second proof, one that digs even deeper into the chain of causes that sustain reality. If every effect has a cause, then what caused the first cause? If every effect has a cause, then what caused the first cause? It's a question as ancient as thought itself, and as modern as quantum theory. Thomas Aquinas called this The second way, the path of causation, and he began, as always, not with faith but with observation. Look around you. Every single thing, every object, every moment depends on something else. A flame depends on fuel. A tree depends on sunlight, water, and soil. A child depends on its parents, who depend on theirs, and so on. Nothing in existence is self-made. Nothing simply is without a reason. Now imagine tracing that chain of causes backward, like rewinding the film of reality. The smoke leads to fire, the fire to a spark, the spark to friction, the friction to movement. And still the question persists. What began the chain? If every cause needs a cause, and the chain stretches backward forever, then the universe could never have started at all, because the first link would always be missing. Just as you would never receive a book if each person in a line insisted on borrowing it from someone else first, existence itself would never arrive if there were no original source to lend it. Aquinas reasoned that an infinite regress of causes, a chain with no beginning, makes no sense. Because if nothing started the sequence, nothing would ever have begun. And yet here we are. Existence is undeniable, the universe is. So there must be a first cause, something that caused everything else but was not itself caused by anything. Something that exists in its own right, the foundation upon which all other causes rest. That, said Aquinas, is what we call God. Centuries later, cosmology would echo his insight in its own language. Scientists would name that first event the Big Bang. The instant space and time exploded from a single point of unimaginable density. But even then, the same question Aquinas posed remains. What caused the Big Bang? Some physicists say it arose from a quantum fluctuation in a vacuum. But even a vacuum is something, a field governed by laws, filled with potential energy. And if those laws existed before the universe began, what set them there? Others argue the universe might be eternal, looping endlessly through cycles of birth and collapse. Yet eternity, too, demands an explanation. What sustains that endless rhythm? Why is there something rather than nothing? For Aquinas, the only coherent answer was that being itself, existence in its purest form, must come from a source that needs no cause, something that doesn't have existence, but is existence, a self-sufficient reality that lends existence to all else, the ground from which everything arises. That is the first cause, not a moment in time, but a timeless foundation. Not a deity who intervenes occasionally, but the very condition that allows anything at all to exist. And so his reasoning deepened. If everything in the world depends on something else, if every being is contingent, fragile, temporary, passing, then surely there must be something that is not contingent, something that cannot not exist. This was his third way, the path of contingency, the search for what he called the necessary being. Look at life itself. Stars are born, burn, and die. Mountains rise and erode. Civilizations flourish and fall. Everything changes, everything fades. And yet, existence continues, generation after generation, moment after moment. If everything were temporary, then there must have been a time when nothing existed at all. But from nothing, nothing comes. Therefore, something, at least one thing, must exist by its very nature, independent of all else, uncreated, unconditioned, eternal. Something that holds existence within itself like fire holds light. That, Aquinas said, is the necessary being. It is the foundation of all reality, the bedrock that prevents the cosmos from collapsing into nothingness. If contingent things are like links in a chain, the necessary being is the hook that holds the chain up. Without it, everything falls. This being cannot be made of matter, because matter changes. It cannot be bound by time, because time flows and fades. It cannot be limited because all limits imply dependence. The necessary being must be limitless, timeless, immutable, existing not within the universe but beneath it, beyond it, upholding it. Aquinas called this being God, but what he meant transcends any image or name. It is not an old man in the clouds or a cosmic watchmaker. It is the reason there is anything at all. Modern physics has yet to answer this riddle. The Big Bang explains how the universe expanded, but not why there was something to expand in the first place. Even theories of multiverses, infinite realities birthing infinite others, fail to explain the foundation of being itself. For Aquinas, every what eventually leads to a why, and every why points toward one single reality, something that simply is, something that depends on nothing, yet upon which all depends. You might imagine it like this: a dark room filled with shadows. Every object, every figure is visible only because of a single light shining from somewhere unseen. The shadows are countless, fleeting, and varied, but the light that reveals them remains constant. Without that light, there would be no room, no shapes, no sight at all. The universe, Aquinas believed, is like that room, full of shadows of existence, each borrowing its being from the one eternal light. And that light is God. He is not one more thing within existence. He is existence itself. Everything that lives, moves, or changes does so because of that infinite, necessary flame. The deeper Aquinas thought, the more he saw that this was not only philosophy, it was poetry written in logic. He wasn't proving a religious doctrine. He was uncovering the hidden structure of reality itself. And within that structure, he found something astonishing. A pattern of perfection, a gradation of being that led inevitably toward the idea of the absolute. If some things are good, others better. If beauty comes in degrees, if truth has levels, then there must exist a standard beyond all comparison. Something perfectly good, perfectly true, perfectly real. And that, he realized, would be his fourth way. The path of perfection. But before he could explain what perfect truly means, he had to confront the most mysterious question of all. If everything in the universe points upward toward perfection, what is that perfection pointing toward? Imagine walking into a darkened room. At first you see nothing, only shifting shadows, faint outlines of form. Then a light flickers to life. Gradually, everything begins to reveal itself. The walls, the furniture, the fine details. But even now, that light has limits. Its glow touches only part of the room. Shadows still remain. The light is not perfect. Thomas Aquinas believed the same was true of everything in the universe. Everywhere we look, we find degrees of goodness, truth, beauty, and perfection. A flower is beautiful, yet another blooms brighter. A kind act warms the heart, yet there exists even greater kindness. We admire wisdom, yet no human wisdom is ever complete. Perfection, it seems, is always something we approach but never fully reach. It's a direction, not a destination. And if there are degrees of perfection, Aquinas reasoned, there must be something that is absolutely perfect. Something that stands as the measure by which all other things are judged. Just as fire is the source of all heat, the ultimate cause of every degree of warmth, there must exist a being that is the source of all perfection, the purest reality of goodness, beauty, and truth. This, he said, is God, not merely a distant deity, but the very embodiment of perfection itself. To Aquinas, the fact that we can even recognize imperfection is proof that we sense the existence of something beyond it. We know what better means only because somewhere deep in the structure of reality there exists a standard of the best. That's why we long for it. Why humans chase truth, beauty, and love that seem forever beyond reach. Because we are, in a sense, reaching for the divine reflection of perfection that called us into being. Think of it this way. When you hear a beautiful song, what moves you isn't just the notes themselves. It's the harmony they hint at, the ideal order that they imperfectly echo. Every human act of creation, every poem, every painting, every act of compassion is a fragment, a reflection of that higher, perfect whole. Aquinas wasn't describing a God who competes with the world, but one whose perfection radiates through it, the source of every good thing we experience, yet beyond every form we can imagine. Just as the sun gives light to all colors without itself being any one of them, so the perfect being gives reality to all perfections without being limited by any. He called this being the fullness of existence, pure actuality without defect, without potential, without change. For if something can change, it means it's lacking something, that it can become more or less. But what is truly perfect cannot change, because it already is everything it could possibly be. This was more than theology. It was a philosophy of existence. Aquinas saw in the gradations of the world not chaos but order, a vertical hierarchy rising from the fleeting to the eternal, from the partial to the complete. At the summit of that hierarchy stands absolute perfection, timeless, unchanging, and whole. And he called that summit God. Yet even this wasn't the end of his reasoning. Perfection implies not only being, but intention. The world doesn't just exist, it moves, unfolds, evolves as though drawn toward a purpose. The planets follow their orbits with mathematical precision. The seasons turn in predictable rhythm. The human heart beats with intricate order, pumping life through every living cell. None of these things, Aquinas observed, possess consciousness enough to guide themselves, and yet they move as if guided. A seed becomes a tree, a star collapses into light, a cell divides, follows its code, builds a body. Nature acts as if it knows, but it does not. So how does the mindless produce the meaningful? How does the unconscious give rise to order and intelligence? For Aquinas, this question led to his fifth and final way, the argument from design and purpose. He saw in nature's laws not randomness but direction, a consistent striving toward ends, an order so precise that even chaos seems to dance to a hidden rhythm. And just as an arrow cannot hit its target without an archer to aim it, the natural world cannot move toward purpose without intelligence behind it. This intelligence, he reasoned, cannot be part of the system it governs, for all systems depend on it. It must exist beyond the universe, guiding it as an unseen mind guides the motion of the body. Aquinas called this guiding principle the supreme intelligence, the architect of all order, the one through whom everything finds its reason, pattern, and destiny. This wasn't a denial of science, it was its foundation. For what is science if not the study of the intelligible patterns of nature? Every equation, every law of physics, every constant, gravity, light, time, speaks of order. And order implies mind. He believed that even if evolution shapes life, even if physics shapes the stars, these processes themselves are intelligible because they are rooted in intelligence. Chance might describe events, but not the laws that make chance possible. Randomness requires a framework to exist within. And that framework, he said, could only come from a rational source. Aquinas' fifth way, then, was not about proving a God of the gaps, filling what science cannot explain. It was about recognizing that science itself, the very existence of reason and law, points toward a deeper rationality beyond the physical. To see the universe as accidental, he argued, is to believe that harmony can emerge from chaos with no composer, that a symphony can write itself, that meaning can bloom from void. But meaning by its nature implies mind, and mind implies purpose. Thus, the universe is not merely a place, it is a message. And behind every message there is a speaker. Aquinas' fifth way concludes where the others began, at the threshold of mystery. For the same reason that a melody implies a musician, the cosmos implies consciousness, an eternal mind whose thought sustains all things. He did not imagine this mind as distant, detached, or cold. He saw it as the very breath of existence, the intelligence that not only designed the world but continues to hold it together in every heartbeat, every atom, every law. And with that, his 5 ways, motion, cause, contingency, perfection, and design, form a single circle of reason that leads back to one truth. That existence itself whispers of something beyond it, something eternal, something divine. But even as his proofs closed, his wonder opened wider. For Aquinas knew that logic can only take us to the edge, to the place where thought becomes awe, and that's where his journey, and ours, truly begins. With his 5 ways complete, Thomas Aquinas laid down his pen. 5 pathways carved from the bedrock of reason, each one leading step by step toward the mystery of God. He had not spoken of miracles nor quoted sacred scripture. He had spoken of motion, of causation, of necessity, of perfection, of design. 5 threads of logic woven into a single tapestry. A portrait of the divine drawn not from revelation, but from the rational heart of reality itself. And in doing so, he accomplished something extraordinary. He bridged 2 worlds that had long been torn apart, the world of faith and the world of reason. For Thomas, these were not enemies, but allies. Faith illuminated what reason could not see, and reason gave structure to what faith already felt. They were 2 lenses focusing on the same light, each revealing, in its own way, the truth that underlies all things. He once wrote that to question is sacred, to think, to doubt, to reason. These 2 are acts of reverence. For truth, if it is truly divine, need not fear the mind that seeks it. That belief became the foundation of his life's work, the idea that logic itself is a spiritual path. Through the clarity of thought, one could glimpse eternity. Through the pursuit of understanding, one could draw nearer to God. And so he became not only a theologian, but a philosopher of being, a thinker who saw God not as a distant figure, but as the very essence of existence itself. To Aquinas, God was not a being among beings. God was being itself. The infinite is behind every was and every will be. The breath that animates reality, the thought that sustains it. The hidden silence that sings through every atom of creation. It's easy to dismiss such ideas in an age of telescopes and quantum equations. Modern science has mapped galaxies, traced DNA, and measured time itself to the smallest fraction. But even now, the same ancient questions remain. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why do the laws of the universe exist at all? Why is reality intelligible, understandable to the human mind? Every discovery, no matter how profound, only deepens the mystery. The Big Bang may describe how the cosmos began, but it cannot tell us why there was a cosmos to begin with. Evolution may explain how life adapts, but not why life yearns. Physics may chart the movement of particles, but not the meaning behind their dance. And so, the conversation between science and philosophy, and between reason and wonder, continues, as Aquinas always believed it should. He did not demand belief. He invited thought. He did not say, believe or perish. He said, think and see where the path leads. And if that path leads to the divine, then perhaps faith is not the opposite of reason, but its fulfillment. In Summa Theologica, his monumental work, Aquinas structured every argument as a dialogue. He raised objections first, the doubts, the counterpoints, the skeptic's voice. Only then did he reason through each one, carefully, patiently, like a craftsman building a cathedral of ideas. He never silenced opposing thought, he illuminated it, because truth, he knew, grows brighter when questioned, not when protected. When he died in 1274 at just 49 years old, he left behind not just a body of work, but a revolution of thought. He showed that faith could walk hand in hand with reason, and that logic, far from threatening belief, could make it deeper, stronger, more alive. In the centuries that followed, the world would change beyond recognition. Empires would rise and fall. Science would unveil wonders that Aquinas could never have imagined. And yet, his questions, the ones that haunted him in candlelit monasteries and lecture halls, still whisper through the corridors of human thought. What moves the unmoved? What causes the cause? What sustains being itself? What defines perfection? And why is there order, beauty, and intelligence woven into the fabric of existence? Whether you call it God or consciousness or the ground of being, the mystery remains. And perhaps that mystery is not meant to be solved but encountered. Aquinas would not have feared this age of information and doubt. He would have embraced it. For every new question is another doorway into the divine. He would have looked through the telescope, through the microscope, through the algorithms and said, reason still leads upward. Follow it. Because to him, the universe was not an accident to be explained away. It was a conversation to be understood. Every law of nature was a word in a divine language, every discovery a syllable in an infinite sentence. Even now, 8 centuries later, the echo of his thought remains. It's in every philosopher who seeks the truth behind appearance. It's in every scientist who looks for order behind chaos. It's in every human being who, gazing up at the night sky, feels that quiet pull, that sense that the stars are not merely burning gas but windows into something greater. That is the legacy of Thomas Aquinas. Not to end the search for God, but to remind us that the search itself is sacred, that our curiosity, our wonder, our relentless need to understand, these are not flaws of the human spirit, but reflections of its divine origin. He proved perhaps not the existence of God as an object, but the necessity of God as a question, the question that underlies all others. And maybe that is the point. Because when logic reaches its horizon, when reason has gone as far as it can go, what remains is awe. And awe is where philosophy ends and worship begins. So the next time you gaze at the stars, or sit in silence and feel the pulse of life beneath your skin, remember the man who dared to prove the infinite with reason alone. Remember the quiet monk who believed that truth and faith are not separate paths, but 2 sides of the same eternal compass. And perhaps in that silence you'll feel what Thomas Aquinas felt. That still, radiant certainty that behind everything that moves, everything that lives, everything that is, there moves something unmoved, something eternal, something divine,